Welcome to From Our Generation, where we uncover the ideas and events that shape the world we live in today. I'm Crom Carmichael.
And I'm Mike Hassel.
Together we'll explore the past to better understand the present, because history isn't just about what happened, it's about how you think about it. Well, Michael, it is December 19th. It is 6 days before Christmas of 2025. And this is going to be our last podcast of this year. And we're going to be doing this on the general topic of corruption and whether or not a society that is becoming more corrupt, how long it can survive as a recognizable society or recognizable for what it has been in the past, and then what kind of corrective actions should be taken in order to try to remedy the problems that you and I will be talking about. And we're going to be trying to take into account, when we're talking about the remedies, we're going to be talking about a lot of the foundational principles and values that we've laid out before, especially about human nature, about the nature of government, the nature of power. And so we'll get started here. But you and I have talked about this first part. We've talked about this for years, and that is, what are the pillars that underpin a prosperous, free society? Mm-hmm. And what we've talked about in the past, and then we'll come back and we'll review each one of these, is sound money. And these are in no particular order because they all are foundational. It's kind of like stools of a chair. You can point to which one you want to identify first, but they're all equally important.
Okay.
And that is sound money, low taxes, low regulations, low general corruption, and equal treatment and respect for the law.
Yes, I've heard that last one described as rule of law,
well,
in a shorter phrase, but you've elaborated on that.
Yeah, equal treatment and respect, and because respect is also, if people don't respect the law, then you don't have rule of law. So what I've tried to do is I've expanded that last part just a little bit. So let's go back and look at where we are today on each one of these. Sound money. Not good. We've gone from a government in 1960 that spent $100 billion a year, 2/3 of which was defense spending. So it was only spending $40 billion in domestic spending or non-defense spending. It's gone up 1,000 times that in 65 years. So that is unsustainable.
Let me ask you this. Our inflation is now about 2 or 3%, got as high as 9% under Biden. There are countries that get inflation of 20, 30%. Latin American countries have done this. Germany famously did it after World War II. Mm-hmm. That's a complete corruption of their wealth, of their value of their money.
That's correct. And it destroys their society.
Yeah, it did.
The only people who survive in societies like that are people who are highly connected to the government. But most of the wealthy who are not highly connected to the government flee those countries ahead of time.
Yes. And when we say they collapse, it means their government collapses, their currency has to be replaced with another one. Mm-hmm. Generally, they
But government,
one new currency for 10,000 of the old currency.
Yeah,
something like that.
But let's also, when we say the government collapses, it doesn't mean necessarily that the government itself. Mugabe, for example, in Zimbabwe.
Yeah, finish the sentence. It doesn't mean
doesn't mean that the government that government collapses. It means it turns into dictatorship. So let me put it that way.
Okay.
Is it the form of government as a democracy?
Yeah. That
will generally collapse.
People will clamor for some kind of control of this chaos.
Something. But so democracy and elections are generally the victim, I guess.
Undermined.
They're undermined. And so where we are right now is we are on an unsustainable course in terms of the increase in the amount of federal debt that is issued. Now that is getting better. We have to look at it this way: Are we heading more rapidly in the wrong direction, or have we begun to turn it around? And the answer is that the increase in federal debt has gone down dramatically since Trump has become president. And I'm trying not to make this about Trump per se, but I'm trying to use January 25th as a change in government and therefore a change in policy, or maybe not a change in policy.
His inauguration day.
His inauguration
this year.
There has been a fundamental change in policy when it comes to government spending, and Trump is trying very hard to rein in spending. He's laid off a number of federal employees. There were all kinds of boondoggles under USAID. He eliminated all of that. He's now trying to rein in all of this fraud and abuse that we'll get to later in healthcare, at all different levels of healthcare, and also in our Social Security system. So he's trying to do all that, and he has Republican support for that, and he has virtually no Democrat support. And just as kind of a preview, next year when we're doing a podcast, we'll really be focusing on the midterm elections, policies that voters will have to decide on in the midterms, and we'll be applying those against the foundational values and principles that we've laid out in the year 2025. Low taxes. We now have, as of January, people will be getting who earn tips, who work overtime, or who are on Social Security. They will be getting very nice refunds in the first quarter of 2026, and then the withholding throughout 2026 for those people will be lower because the big beautiful bill did lower taxes. The big beautiful bill also extended the 2017 tax cut, and so instead of taxes going up in 2026, taxes will remain what they have been. So I would say that lower taxes, we're heading in the right direction on taxes. Lower regulation. Trump is cutting regulations all over the place. And so I think that will be beneficial because regulations cost money. If you have to comply with a regulation that does not, and where the regulation does not have a net economic benefit, but it just simply costs you money to comply with it, then that's a negative. And so under Biden, those regulations in the regulatory state became more and more powerful, and now Trump is doing his best to try to unwind that. So I think that's a net good. And then equal treatment and respect for laws. This is a tricky one. What do you think that we are? Do you think that we are striving to be treated more equally under the law? That's one topic. And then the other one is respect for law. Where do you think we are on those two things?
I am very concerned on both levels there.
Okay.
I think equal treatment under the law is not especially valued because our culture tends to see an outcome as being a function of your race or your status.
Okay.
And so people who are wealthy are attacked, lawfare, people who are powerful, the law is used to undermine them economically or politically. And so I think the general attitude that I perceive about equal treatment under the law is that it should be adjusted for demographics,
Okay.
let's say that way. And that's not equal treatment.
Okay.
When you're treated differently by your race.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to push back just a tad on this because you said the wealthy are attacked. I think there are some particular industries that are very wealthy that have become wealthy because of government.
Yes.
And I think particularly virtually all of the healthcare industry, but especially all of the companies that are involved in insurance and adjudication, meaning settling the claims. I think that the amount of general corruption, not necessarily illegal corruption, but general corruption, has grown dramatically since Obamacare passed in 2010. But it has accelerated dramatically in the last 4 years, and we'll have some data to show on that in just a little bit.
Right.
And we'll also be able to explain why. And I think the why is really, really interesting because it gets very much to what you and I have been talking about in previous podcasts.
Well, one example of that is the green energy sector.
Sure.
It has become saturated with government money.
Right.
And so that's another example.
Government money and regulations.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, for example, just this past week, we saw that Ford Motor Company wrote off $19 billion on their EV business. And what had happened over the last 4 or 5 years in particular was that under the Biden administration, the mileage per car increased dramatically. The regulations against combustion engines increased.
The regulatory requirements for future mileage per car.
Yes.
Is what you're referring to.
Yes.
They were going to have to get 30 and then 40 and then 50 miles per gallon.
And it already started up.
Yeah.
It had already started up.
Yeah.
And
they've made some gains, but they really don't have the technology to get.
And an EV was going to be the solution, and so Ford made the concluded that that these regulations would not be repealed, and so they went all in on EVs, believing that the only way they would meet the regulations in 10 years from the time they were passed back in 21, which is only another 6 years from now, the only way they could meet it was that they had to actually even take their trucks, their pickup trucks, and turn them into electronic vehicles. And so they spent billions, obviously, because they've now written off $19 billion. And that also pushed the price of cars and pickup trucks. It pushed the price of cars up 25 to 30% in the last 4 years. And so now what we'll probably see is a reduction in the price of cars from a very high level. So it's not going to be that they'll immediately go back to the prices of 2020, but you'll see prices come down on cars because the regulations on what the car manufacturers have to do, they are being lowered. Some people don't like that, but we're just saying that if affordability matters, then lowering the price of cars by diminishing or reducing the regulations, then that's a good thing. So now we're going to move to the major institutions, and we're going to so those are the things that are all government related. The first one: sound money, low taxes, low regulations, low corruption, and equal treatment and respect for laws. Now we're going to get into major institutions, and we're going to be spending part of this podcast talking about whether or not these institutions have become more corrupted in the last decade or so.
Okay.
When I say government, I'm talking now at the national level, but we should probably also include certainly state governments when we talk about that. And we're going to be talking about each of the three branches of government, meaning Congress, the executive branch, and the judiciary.
Well, you have massive corruption in Chicago, for instance, a city government.
That's a city government.
And the state of Illinois is famously corrupt.
Yes.
And California, I think, fits in that category.
California, New York. And so we'll be, when we talk about government, it will not be just the federal government. And then we're going to be talking about media, and we'll be talking about media in terms of two parts of media, meaning legacy media. And when I think of legacy media, what I think of in legacy media, Mike, is the legacy media is the media that gets to determine what stories it will report and the slant that it will take when it reports the stories. So social media is not social media unless the social media companies actually take steps to do what I just said the legacy media does do.
Which they have done.
Which they have done. And so, but they're not doing it right now.
Right.
But the legacy media does determine what stories it will report and does determine how it will report those stories.
Well, I mean, let's just look at this historically. When the country was founded, the media was newspapers.
Yes.
The media is that what it said? Was composed of newspapers.
Just newspapers.
That was just about it.
Yep.
Magazines came along, but it was print. And then we had in the 20th century broadcast, radio first, then TV. And that's mostly what we mean by legacy media is those three ways of transmitting information.
Exactly.
But in the last 3 decades or so, you have internet-based media.
Right. Which is much more dynamic and much more difficult to control unless and in the case of Jeff Zuckerberg, he said he was told.
Mark Zuckerberg.
He was Mark Zuckerberg. Excuse me, Mark Zuckerberg,
the guy who runs Facebook, who founded it.
Yeah, he was told to suppress, especially during COVID, to suppress certain points of view, and
by the Biden administration.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so was Twitter, and actually, this is even frankly, a lot of this suppression took place even in the 2020 election, the run up to the 2020 election, and that's a very dangerous thing when government officials use their power to tell media what to report or what, especially social media, because social media is considered to be a platform where all points of view can be expressed.
Well, they're exempted from some categories of regulation, I think, because of that principle.
Yes.
That it's open.
Yeah.
And so they're not responsible in a lot of ways for what people say, but then they become responsible. That's another difficulty in that source of media.
Yeah, and so the question that we're going to be asking is the media now moving? You got two pieces: the legacy media and the other media, the modern media or the internet media.
Right.
Are they now being less regulated and more open, or are they less? That'll be what we'll be discussing, and then education. And this is not only K through 12, but it's also higher education. It's probably especially higher education. Has it moved where it's more, instead of teaching you how to think, it's been teaching you what to think? I think that the trend of teaching what to think rather than how to think has been going on for 20 to 30 years. And so the question is there now pressure against that and more toward how to think? And what part will AI play in that? And then we get into business, and is business becoming more corrupt and trying to use government to feather its own nest and to protect its interests? Is business doing that? And then the last one just would be, in general, just the public. Is the public becoming more just generally corrupt, where it responds to receiving something for nothing? Might be the way. Is that becoming worse or better? Because it's been going in a certain direction. Is that becoming worse or better? Those will be the things. And then when we get to government, we said taxes, spending, regulation, and lawfare. So let's get into a few of these issues, because I have some charts here. And I want to first of all start with this topic of you have media who has been attacking Trump, and Trump has been responding in a very interesting way. He's been suing them for libel, and he has been successful in winning most of those suits. He hasn't won every one of them, but he's won most of them. And he most recently has filed a $10 billion lawsuit against the BBC. And what the BBC did was it took about an hour-long speech, and it took sentences or phrases from very different parts of the speech, edited them together, and put that out as a soundbite. That Trump is arguing distorted what he actually said in the speech, and they did it maliciously and intentionally. Mm-hmm. That'll be a very interesting suit, I would imagine. If I'm guessing here, I'm going to guess it'll be settled. Yeah. I don't believe the BBC will want to go through the discovery process to have all the emails going back and forth between the editors and the producers as to how they arrived at the decision to take those particular three phrases and put them together and act like it was one phrase. I think that'd be very difficult for them. So I imagine that'll be settled. And I think what this is doing is, some people in the media claim that what Trump is doing is chilling. And do you think it's chilling, or do you think that it is a way to bring about accountability?
Well, this is back to the point I was just hinting at earlier about internet media, and is it supposed to be regulated or not? Can you say whatever you want or not? And so it is chilling, I think. In the sense that what you can say is controlled, but whether these things should be controlled is the question.
Well, this is legacy media now we're talking about, not internet media.
I know it, but I'm saying it's a similar kind of question how much control over what you say is appropriate. In the United States, we have a very loose standard. You can say a lot of things that you cannot say in Britain, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
It's easier to sue somebody for libel in Britain, and they're throwing people in jail for saying hurtful things on social media.
Right.
Something that gives anxiety to other people.
Mm-hmm.
You can say those kind of things in the United States. So, I mean, we've got a lot of work to do to come to some legal standard and cultural understanding of how control of speech works. You know, you can't say yell fire in a crowded theater. That's a long-standing example of speech that's not tolerated.
But what I'm talking about here in particular is Trump's strategy of trying to hold the media who says things about him that he believes are false and malicious.
Mm-hmm.
He is suing them, and they are settling by giving him money to make the suit go away.
Most of the past ones have, I think.
Most
BBC is new.
That's a brand new one.
And you're predicting that will be settled. I think that's a good prediction.
Yeah, but my question is Trump's strategy is that good for society, or should media be allowed to say things that are false and malicious and not be held accountable? Should they be allowed to do that?
Well, that's what libel law is for. You know,
Right.
And I'm saying it's different in the U.S. and England,
Mm-hmm.
and there's merits on both sides. There's reason to control malicious, hateful speech, but that's a large part of cancel culture, and we don't like that. Right?
Well, so this is where the battle is.
That's right.
Yeah, and but I will make I believe that when the legacy media, I'm particularly focused here on the legacy media because I'm defining legacy media as that media which has control of its stories that it decides to report and how it decides to report, not social media platforms which people say all kinds of things.
Yeah.
I'm talking about these institutional medias. The first one was where George Stephanopoulos claimed 3 times that Trump had been convicted of rape.
Yes.
And he sued ABC, and Trump did. He sued ABC, and he sued George Stephanopoulos because that was false. And ABC settled and apologized.
Yes.
And so that's happened now 2 or 3 more times. I think there's been 3 lawsuits. CBS on 60 Minutes edited an interview of Kamala Harris, and instead of playing the entire interview, they edited it, and Trump's argument was they edited out some of the gobbledygook to try to make her appear more intelligent and coherent. I'm using his words in his lawsuit. They settled that rather than go through the discovery process, because in discovery, CBS has to produce why it decided to edit out the language that when you looked at the whole thing, you said she sounded a lot better after the edits than before. So Trump's argument was that the CBS is presenting themselves as fair and balanced and not biased, and he's arguing that they settled also.
You know, you might call this just another form of lawfare.
Yes.
He is using lawfare in the same way it's been used against him. He's finally, in my opinion, he said, this is a one-sided fight. If that's the rules of the game and that's what they're going to do to try to bring me down, I'm going to use the same fuel. I'm
going to use the law, but but you're not allowed to libel somebody. But if you're a politician, the standard is different, and that standard, I believe, is changing. And I personally think that especially legacy media, which has control of its stories and what it says, after careful thought, they put out a story. And if their stories are false and malicious, there has to be some way to hold them accountable for that. And this is Trump's way of doing it.
Yes, he doesn't have many alternatives.
Yes, and so you can't put him in jail, and I don't want him put in jail.
Right.
I don't want that.
Right.
But I do think that they're free to say what they want to, so long as what they say is not malicious and false. And therefore, and even then, they're free to say it. They just now can be held financially accountable and legally accountable.
Yeah.
So that's kind of an interesting question. And then we get into I want to get into immigration, and I want to get into the combination of immigration and health care, because we're seeing in Minnesota, that's the story that we've seen the most about, where there's been a tremendous amount of fraud. But the first thing I want to do is I want to pull up a clip that shows a number of politicians talking about what they claim is the case in terms of whether or not illegal immigrants whether or not Americans taxpayers are paying for the health care for illegal immigrants. And so we're going to pull up this clip. The first one is a whole bunch of clips of Democrats, followed by a clip of Gavin Newsom. So
the question here is it legal for non-citizens to be given? Well,
that's not a question. The answer to that question is it is.
There's a factual answer, but we're going to show.
It is not legal. It is not legal.
Yeah.
In fact, it is illegal to provide health care coverage to illegal immigrants. That is against the law.
Okay.
Republicans have claimed that the Democrats are doing it, and this is their response to that. Okay. So let's listen to these clips.
People who are here in the United States legally have never been eligible for the Obamacare subsidies, for Medicare, for Medicaid. So what exactly are you saying that they're trying to do when you talk about giving free health care?
So just as a point of fact, it's against the law for non-citizens to get those subsidies.
Undocumented immigrants, as you know, are actually ineligible for federal health care.
No, let me correct you.
Let me say it, then you can talk, okay? Right now, undocumented immigrants are not eligible for federal health care programs. Democrats, as you heard, say they're not trying to change that.
That is a bold-faced lie, and it really shows how desperate they are.
And just as you said, Margaret, zero federal dollars can go to undocumented immigrants through Medicare, through Medicaid, through ACA.
Is it true that you want to restore American taxpayer benefits to illegal immigrants?
Of course not. And thank you for asking that question, because this is also an outright lie.
If you are undocumented in our country, you cannot get health care from the Affordable Care Act exchange. You are not eligible for Medicare. You are not eligible for Medicaid for undocumented people. So they're just making that up.
Start with this. Undocumented immigrants who come across the border, who've been flagged for deportation, they cannot get Medicaid. They cannot get Obamacare. They can't get on the Affordable Care Act. That is not legal. Democrats are not trying to change that.
As it relates to undoc health care, yeah, I'm proud of that because I believe in universal health care. You know, others may say it, I get it. First state in the country, regardless of pre-existing conditions, ability to pay, and regardless of your immigration status. I promised that, I promoted it, I ran 3 times on it. I did it when I was mayor. People know who I am.
Okay.
So they're saying, as a matter of law, which we just said before the clips,
right,
that this is the case for the law, but the implication is that it's not happening because it's illegal.
Correct. That's what all of the people who said it's not happening, and all of the media personalities.
Well, they said it's illegal, and the implication is that it's not happening.
They also said it's not
illegal.
happening. They also
on a couple of cases, most of the time they were talking about the law.
I know, but they also said it's not happening.
Okay.
And so what I'm saying is, and the media people, especially, they were the ones who were also saying the law says they can't get it, so they're not getting it. And then you had Gavin Newsom at the end said, yes, I've been giving undocumented workers health care, undocumented illegal immigrants. I've been giving them health care in California for years, all the way back since I was mayor, and he's been governor there for close to 2 terms. So what Gavin Newsom is saying he's been doing, and by the way, and
What?
What he's been doing is giving illegal immigrants health care.
Breaking the law.
Breaking the law. And
he's proud of it.
And he's very proud of it now. But here's what's interesting about this, and we're going to get a chart up here. If you could pull up the table, Atticus, if you could put the table up on Medicaid. This table here shows, and for people who are listening to the podcast, we'll give the information, we'll state it. But this is a chart that shows 6 states. It shows the population of each of those states, the Medicaid that's the total population of each state, the total Medicaid spending for each state, and then the spending on Medicaid for the population of the state. Now, obviously, not all of the state is on Medicaid, but this is the best way of trying to show which states are being judicious in the way that they're trying to spend money on Medicaid and which ones are not. And it's important to understand that the way Medicaid works is that if a state spends a third of a dollar or 33 cents of its money on Medicaid, the federal government contributes 2/3. And so for a state that wants to increase the amount of economic activity within its own state, it can do so by spending lots and lots of money on Medicaid because it gets a 2-to-1 return from the federal government, and that money is spent in the state. And so what you and I have been talking about for a year is that human nature would say if you set up a system like that, over time, more and more states will decide to take advantage of that system for their own economic well-being. And in fact, Michael, we were talking about this before we went on air. In the articles, under the Articles of Confederation, every one of the 13 states could coin their own money. Mm-hmm. And so in the first 5 years, they coined their own money and they debased their own currency. And so it shows that human nature is that if you give public officials the ability to feather their own nest or to improve the lives of their constituents at the expense
of other people,
of everybody else, they'll do it.
Particularly in other states.
Yes.
Which is what's happening here.
Yeah. So here you have of the 6 states that I selected, and these are all big states, but then I added Minnesota because it's in the news. Florida has a population of almost 24 million. It spends almost $35 billion on Medicaid total, which is a total of a little under $1,500 a person. On the other end of that is New York. New York has 19 million in population and spends just under $100 billion, $98 billion on Medicaid, which works out to $5,100 per citizen. If these were small amounts of money, it wouldn't be that bad for the whole country, but these are very large amounts of money. And so New York State is spending $5,100 per person, whereas Florida is spending $1,460. So New York is spending more than 3 times on Medicaid, which means that what they're doing in New York is they have to be encouraging the use of Medicaid and the use of billing at high levels. And then because the state is the one that sets the reimbursement rate. And then the federal government then contributes $2 for every dollar the state contributes. And so what you see is, and California is almost tied with Minnesota, because we've heard all these stories about Minnesota and all this fraud in Minnesota.
Twice the cost per citizen.
Yes, more than twice the cost of Florida.
Yeah.
But Minnesota, we've heard, they're all this fraud. Minnesota's a small state, has 5.7 million people, about the size of Tennessee, maybe even a little smaller.
Yeah.
It spends $19 billion on Medicaid, $3,300 per person. And we've heard of, and compared to Florida, once again, of $1,460. So it's 250% more. But we've heard that the reason for that is the amount of fraud on Medicaid. And but California is 39 million people, and they spend $130 billion. So it is an enormous number. So Gavin Newsom in our clip is proud of the fact that he is not following federal law. He's proud of that. And so the question is, how do you hold politicians who don't follow the law? How are they to be held in account if the media misreports on the facts? This did not take me long to pull these numbers. I just went on AI and then pull these up, and Grok provided me these answers from a whole bunch of different sources. And so it's not as if the media, what I'm saying, took a lot of work to pull up. This is information that's readily available, but the media has chosen not to report accurately what is going on. And I don't know how to. What do you think? How do we handle that when the media? And what does it mean for our society if the media has decided to side in a very partisan way with those who want to spin us into oblivion?
Well, two things immediately come to mind. One is to expose it, and you have alternative media that will expose it. It's not broadly exposed because a lot of people are not looking at those alternative media.
Right.
But then, the litigation that we were talking about earlier that Trump is doing to sue somebody, in his case, he has standing to sue because he's the one that's hurt. I don't think you and I have standing to sue California over their theft of federal resources.
Well, let me ask you a question. This is an interesting question. Does the state of Tennessee have standing to sue the state of California for breaking the law?
You'd have to ask a lawyer.
Yeah, I mean that's it. Because what we're looking at here is the other way to hold politicians to account is elections.
Yes.
But the only way to hold politicians to account with elections is for voters to be accurately informed on what's going on.
Right.
So this, to me, is when we look at corruption, and that's the focal point of this podcast, is the level of corruption in our country. To me, has been growing, and it has been growing, and the indication of that is the dramatic increase in federal spending. Trump is now trying to reverse that, and he's trying to say, look, we have laws. Illegal immigrants are not supposed to be getting, under our laws, are supposed to be getting health care. So he's trying to now hold these states to account. But I want to pull up another chart. This is the chart that shows the non-citizens who have been given a Social Security number. Social Security numbers are supposed to go only to U.S. citizens by law. Only U.S. citizens are supposed to get Social Security numbers. This shows that under the Biden administration, in 2021, 270,000 non-citizens were given Social Security numbers. In 2022, that number more than doubled to 590,000. In 2023, it almost doubled again to 964,000. And then in 2024, it did double from that to over 2 million and to almost 2,100,000. What does it mean where somebody gets a Social Security number? It means they can vote. It means they can register to vote. And so what you're looking at here is it is illegal for an illegal immigrant to get a Social Security number. This shows that the Biden administration was very proactive in trying to give more and more and more illegal immigrants Social Security numbers. So this is corruption at the highest level, and because once you get back to the rule of law, the law says an illegal immigrant can't have a Social Security number. If you don't like that, change the law. Work to change the law. Don't just ignore the law and give them anyway.
Right.
And so this is another great concern to me. But
in terms of exposure,
yeah.
I just saw a story this week that someone has proposed a bill that would publish the name and salary of every federal employee. And the point being, it's not corrupt to hire an employee, but those employees are often used for corrupt ends, for partisan ends, particularly in the deep state, in the bureaucracy. They're there to entrench policy choices that favor big government.
That's a great point. That's a great point, because the people who work in the Social Security Administration, they are bound by the law to make sure that the people they are issuing Social Security numbers to are American citizens.
Yeah.
And they're not following the law. And by the way, every federal employee, before they get their first paycheck, takes an oath to uphold the Constitution. And so if it's not a ceremonial thing, it's illegal. It's a legal thing. And,
we had these senators that said to anyone in the military that they are not to follow an illegal order. You remember that?
Yes.
And the controversy that came about, whether they were trying to undermine Trump's legal orders and suggest they weren't legal. And so there was that furor. But, what if somebody made a similar rule that for everybody that's employed by the government, that they are not to do anything? They take an oath not to do it.
Right. And they are doing it. In this case, they are, under Biden, they were told, somebody higher up told the employees in the Social Security Administration to issue Social Security numbers to illegal immigrants.
Right.
But here's what's also interesting. Of the 10 wealthiest counties in the country, 7 of the 10 are the 7 counties that touch Washington, D.C. So it gives you an idea of just how much money is involved and why this battle is there. 94% of the voters in Washington, D.C. voted for Kamala Harris because they're voting their personal interest. They're not voting the interest of the country. They're voting their own interests. And so this is where this question of general corruption, and then we look at it by different institutions, whether or not we're moving in the right direction or the wrong direction. I personally think that, and there's a lot of language that Donald Trump uses that makes me scratch my head and shake my head a bit, that I think I wouldn't have said it that way, and I wouldn't have said that at all.
Right.
There's things he does that, but when I look at his actual actions and what he is trying to do, I think that he is the most consequential president since FDR, and FDR was consequential, and LBJ was very consequential to me in expanding the size and power of government.
Yeah, the whole Great Society program.
The Great Society programs. Obama was consequential. It doesn't mean for good. It just means when he passed Obamacare, all of this stuff that we're looking at now, with this explosion in health care, both in terms of Medicare,
healthcare cost,
Medicaid, Obamacare, the cost of health care, is all tied to that the so-called Affordable Care Act, because it gave the states all of these reasons to overspend. And then the other thing that Obama did was he nationalized student loans, and that gave the colleges and universities the ability to dramatically increase their tuitions, and because the federal government was going to be the one who loaned the money to allow the students to pay the higher tuitions, and that then has created the student loan debt that we now see, and that's only 15 years ago.
Yeah. That they're making an effort to forgive, and so it becomes a taxpayer expense.
Yeah, and
a debt that's never collected.
Correct, and that is spending that actually is never appropriated, because the loan is never paid back. The loan is forgiven, but nobody ever approved it, and these are kind of corrupting ways of doing things, and a society cannot survive if it's corrupt. And so what we're going to be delving into as we go into next year into the election is whether or not Trump is reining in the federal government, and whether or not that is good, beneficial for society as a whole. Does it improve the lot in life of middle and lower income people? Is it benefiting them at a higher rate of improvement than, say, the wealthy? And so that's what we're going to be doing. But what I wanted to do today for our last podcast of the year was kind of lay out this general theme of corruption and the various tentacles of corruption and how it is affecting or has affected institutions, and what it takes if we all agree that corruption's bad, and everybody will at least say the corruption's bad. Everybody will agree the corruption's bad. The question is, are we working together to rein it in?
I think it was Adam Smith that said there is a great deal of ruin in a nation, maybe in a great nation, something like that. But his point was there's ruin, corruption, bad stuff in every society, probably in every family. You know, you could extend it that way. You know, Chicago's been corrupt for a century, but it's still there.
Yeah.
You know, and so the question is how much corruption can be digested, you know, can be tolerated. There's a lot of this that's undermining our prosperity that I think that we have a duty to go after. I don't think that we can completely clean it up because here's the other point I wanted to make. A lot of this benefits particular people, and they don't want it cleaned up.
Well, and to your point here, the insurance industry has benefited dramatically by Obamacare. I read an article. I don't remember where I read it, but there are millions of people who have been signed up for Obamacare who don't know they're on Obamacare, but the insurance companies have been receiving the premiums for those people who have never applied for a claim. But the insurance companies have received $35 billion to do absolutely nothing for those beneficiaries, those so-called beneficiaries. And so this gets into the side of business corruption because insurance companies' stocks since Obamacare have gone up 1,000%.
Since Obamacare was
passed, insurance company stocks have gone up on average 1,000%. Health insurance companies.
So they're 10 times more valuable than they were.
The stocks are, yes. The average stock, typical stock market, the rest of the stock market's gone up 250%. So Obamacare dramatically benefited the insurance companies. And so now insurance companies have a vested interest in the corruption because they're benefiting from it.
Right.
And the question is, how do you deal with executives and boards of directors who want to continue to see politicians promote programs that will eventually, when I say eventually, I'm not talking about in 50 years. I'm talking about within probably 10 years. If this isn't reined in, the United States dollar will cease to be the reserve currency, and that's when the inflation really hits. And so we're at a particular point in our history where we're either going to be able to reverse this trend. And Trump, in his speech a couple of nights ago, he called out the insurance companies individually, and he called out the pharmaceutical companies individually because those are the two giant industries that benefit from government spending more and more and more and more money on health care. And so the question is whether or not they can be brought to heel and to say, okay, let's all get around the table and let's work within some constraints, because that's what we don't have at the federal level, because the federal government is the only government in our country that can coin money and borrow money at this level because of its ability to coin. There are no constraints on spending. And so politicians will always say, well, yeah, I'll try to buy votes. And so that's what that to me is what the midterm is going to end up being about.
There's a lot of elements to this, rural versus agrarian.
Sure.
A lot of this is happening in cities. I think the main thing that drives polarization and partisanship is the difference between rural and urban interests. Cities tend to be blue. Countryside tends to be red. If you had people in these red states seeing this published list of how many people there are making maybe twice what they make, right, and they're the ones that are paying for it,
mm-hmm.
It probably will change. There'll be more force to change it. Transparency helps a lot of this. We don't have transparency on much. I think there's a lot of things we still don't know about, and because the scale of this is incredible.
Yeah, well,
$2 trillion a year in a deficit is just an incredible number.
Right, and at one point, the federal debt was actually going up at more than $3 trillion a year even though the federal deficit was only going up at 2%, because the federal government was borrowing money and loaning it, and that didn't count as spending. Now, it counted as debt, which is the same thing if it never gets paid back. So that's another
pretending to be a loan when it's actually spending.
When it's actually spending, and that's another form of corruption.
Right.
And so you have all these different institutions, and you have all these businesses, and you have the Trump administration, and I think Republicans in general. You know, people say, well, not all Republicans. Well, that's true. If 95% of Republicans in Congress support something that Trump is doing, and 95% of Democrats oppose it, I think you can argue credibly Republicans want to do this and Democrats want to do that. You can argue that credibly,
yes,
without it being 100% of both.
Yes.
And so that's what we'll be looking at when we get into next year as we look at the midterms.
Okay.
So, Michael, Merry Christmas to you and your family.
Happy Christmas to you.
And Happy New Year to you, because I won't see you again on this podcast until next year.
I'll hold my breath.
No, not too long, I hope. Thank you.